Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. Let's start with the regular recap so we see where we are up to in the Rambam. We are on the 4th volume. We've learned the book of knowledge, mitzvahs relating to believing in God, loving God, fearing God. We learned the book of love, speaking about all the mitzvahs that are there to develop our love for Hashem, like mezuzah, tefillin. Book 3, we spoke about all time-related mitzvahs, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Yom Kippur, fasts, such as today. And now in book number 4, we are learning all the halachas that relate to men and women. And within this book, there are 5 subjects. The first subject is marriage, in which there are 25 chapters. And today we will be concluding this entire topic of marriage and concluding the 25th chapter. And over the next 2 weeks, we'll be learning about divorce. And that too, as I mentioned, is a part of Torah. Nobody should have to know of it, but it too has its place. And so we will be learning it as part of the wisdom of Hashem. Now for today's Rambam, the laws of marriage, Ishus, chapter 25. If somebody marries a woman without discussing any details with regards to the following, and he discovers that she has taken upon herself certain vows that will get in the way of the marriage, as we'll see in the moment, which she does not want to annul, or she's not able to annul. He may divorce her without having to pay her ksuvah. Not the main part of the ksuvah, nor the secondary part. Why? Because it's considered a mekach ta'us. It's considered a false transaction that took place under erroneous pretenses, meaning that he thought he was marrying a regular woman, and now he discovers that she has a certain condition that she knew about and she didn't tell him about and he did not know about. So the marriage was done in error, and therefore he won't even have to pay ksuvah because such information should have been given to him. Now, what kind of vows are we talking about? Example, she said she'll never eat meat, she'll never drink wine. I don't know why meat and wine are so serious. I don't know. She'll never adorn herself. She'll never get well dressed with colored garments or with other objects. She'll never wear jewelry, with which women of her locale customarily do adorn themselves with. So you can understand now that's like something that's not what he expected. He thought he was marrying a regular woman that will dress appropriately. And now she tells him that she has this kind of mishugasim. She has this vow. It's something she'll never do. And she never told it to him before the marriage. So he can dissolve the marriage. If, however, she is bound by other vows, she does not forfeit anything. If he is going to want to divorce her, he will have to pay out all of those, whatever it is, $225,000. The ksuvah. Okay, that was as far as vows. From here till the rest of the chapter deals with if she had some kind of blemish or deformity that was kept a secret from him. So let's go through the different scenarios. We'll go through it on a quicker basis. Hopefully this doesn't happen today. Similarly, when a man marries a woman without having made any specifications about the matter, and he discovers that she has one of the blemishes that mar a woman's appeal to her husband, as outlined above in chapter 7. If the husband neither knew nor heard about this blemish and never willingly accepted it, he never knew that this is what he would have to deal with, he may divorce her without having to pay the ksuvah again. This was a marriage that was done under false understanding, neither the main part of the ksuvah or the secondary amount. Now, what do we mean that he didn't know about it? So, sure. If there's a bathhouse in the city and he has relatives, female relatives, then he can't say I didn't know about it, because if before he married a woman, he would have found out about it, would have asked his friends and family, what's she like? Even if it's in places that are not as revealed, but we'll see, it's all provided that's something he would have known about. we can assume that he heard about this, and therefore he would have to pay out the ksuva in full. He wouldn't be able to say, this is something I didn't know about, because it's something that he surely should have found out about. So I guess we take the principle that a person can't say, I didn't know, if it's something that it is expected for him to find out before he enters into it. If the town has no bathhouse, or if he doesn't have relatives, then he would be able to make such a claim. Regular fits of epilepsy are considered a blemish that is unseen, because as long as the person is not going through a fit, then they're perfectly fine. But when they do, they're completely not manageable. Today, there's medication to deal with it. We're talking about back in the day, where when a person was having a fit, they would become insane until it was over. So a person says that I didn't know, you should have made me aware that this is the medical condition that you have. We'll see soon. This is all where she had the condition and she never told him. If it's a condition that only developed after they got married, then none of this applies. By contrast, with regards to physical blemishes that are openly seen, the husband cannot claim that he didn't know about it, because they could be seen by everyone. And we assume that he would have found out. He would have heard about it, and it means that he agreed to it. He can't say, now I didn't know, because you definitely didn't know, because it's something that everybody knows. This law applies only in those places where it is customary for women to walk in the marketplace with their faces uncovered and everyone sees each other. Also, they know this is so-and-so's daughter, and this is so-and-so's sister, as in the European cities of the present era. In places where, by contrast, women do not go out to the marketplace at all, and if a girl does go out to the bathhouse, she goes out veiled, where people don't see her. Sounds like quite primitive, but I guess that's based on the lifestyles that we have today. Then he would be able to make such a claim, because, again, he could say he did not know about it. Although it is forbidden to marry a woman without seeing her first. So I'm not sure how exactly that works. I think one is not allowed to marry a woman without seeing her, but if he did, the marriage still works. So I guess it would be in such a scenario. Such a claim may be issued when there is no bathhouse in the city, or the husband does not have a relative with whom we can check. If, however, there is a bathhouse in the city, or they do, or it is not customary for women to go out with their faces. Again, if, however, there is a bathhouse, if it's not customary for women to go out with their faces uncovered, again, if he has a relative, and I guess in those days it was public bathhouses where all men would go together and all women would go at the same time, and they had no issue, again, he cannot make a claim that he didn't know, because he could have found out. If the woman's habit is to cover herself and to hide, even in the bathhouse, or she washes at night, or in a private bathhouse, it's quite logical, the same principle. If he could have found out, then he has no claim that he didn't know. If it was impossible for him to know, then he can have a claim that he should have been given that information. These matters are concepts that reason dictates. They're not decrees. They're not illogical laws that we don't understand. They're laws that go on common sense. Now, some of the Ga'inim, some of the rabbis have ruled that our sage's statement that a husband can check with his relatives does not apply only to his relatives, but also to his friends. Meaning, even if a man lives in a city where he doesn't have any relatives, but he does have friends, then he still has no claim against her, because he could have found out from his friend's sister or wife. However, says the Rambam, I do not agree with this conclusion. So he says some rabbis, he means after the era of the Talmud, and therefore he can argue. I do not agree with this conclusion. For a man is not going to reveal all the concerns he has regarding matters such as these to anyone that is not family. In other words, just because a person has friends, it doesn't mean he's going to ask such personal questions. So this law is specifically if the person has family from which he could have found out that information. But if he has no family, then how should he have known? And so such information should have been shared. He can't ask friends, because that would be a person wouldn't be comfortable to do that. Okay, so more on the subject of blemishes. What is meant by a claim issued because of physical blemishes? If the blemishes that were found were such that it is certain that they existed before she got married, before she was consecrated, like she has an extra finger that didn't just grow in the last 3 days or the like, the burden of proof is on the father. He needs to prove that the husband knew about it and he accepted it, or he was able to know about it. if the father can't bring any proof that the husband knew about it, so one second, sorry. You feel free to unmute yourselves if you have a question. I thought that was background noise. If that was somebody asking a question, then please speak up. So yeah, if she has some kind of blemish that she certainly already had beforehand, then the father needs to prove that the husband knew about it in order for the husband to have to give the ksuvah. If the father can prove the husband knew about it, then he would have to pay out those full, whatever it is, $25,000. The following rules apply when the blemishes were such that they could not have come about after she was consecrated. If the blemishes were discovered after the woman entered her husband's home, the burden of proof is now on the husband. He must show that she possessed these blemishes even before. So if it's something that could have only developed in a short amount of time, then the husband will have to pay out in full, because it wasn't a marriage done under false pretense, because this happened since. He'll have to prove that she already had this condition before the marriage. She'll have to have solid proof for that. If the blemishes were discovered while she's still in her father's home, before she's even moved into her husband, so he's already married her, he was already Makaridish her, he was already betrothed her, but she's still living in her parents' house, then the father would need to prove that he let the husband know. If the husband brought proof that the woman had the blemishes before she was married, or she agreed, she admitted, but the father brought proof that the husband already saw it, he knew about it, or we could assume that he knew about it, again, then the husband, by default, the husband has to pay out the full ksuvah, those full, whatever it is, $25,000, unless there's proof otherwise. If the husband proves that it already existed beforehand, that he wasn't made known about it, but the father of the girl proves that the husband did know about it, so we lead to the benefits of the woman, and therefore the husband would have to pay her out. He wouldn't be able to say that I didn't know about it unless he was able to reject the girl's father's proofs. If a person already was with his wife, he already had relations with her, and then a while later he says that she has a particular deformity that I did not know about, then it's too late. Even if it's on her foot. Because she has an interesting concept, we presume that a man will not drink from a cup unless he checks it well first. I don't know, I don't really understand that fully, because certainly I think today in relationships, that's certainly not what marriage is about. But the Rambam does say that we assume that he knew of it beforehand, so he has to come with that claim immediately. If he comes a few days later, then it's too late. The husband, if he says that she has this deformity that undermines our marriage, that she knew about and she didn't let me know about, then that has to be said right away. If it's after the first day, then it's too late. Then we say that this is something that you already knew about and you didn't have an issue with, so now why are you suddenly making it an issue? The following rules apply when a man marries a woman and it is discovered that she does not have a fixed time for her period, but it just comes at random times without her knowing in advance. Now, this obviously could be a halachic issue, because the Torah prohibits a man from being with a woman when she is in a state of niddah. So it's not a problem. Why? Because she could still check herself before intimacy. As long as she checks herself before intimacy and she sees that she is not in that state where intimacy is forbidden, then they could still be together. And he would check himself. So after intimacy, to ensure that she isn't in a period. But the point, this is basically just checking that there is no blood. So this is not considered a deformity or a condition that interferes with the marriage, because there's a simple solution to it. Even though this is a great blemish, it does not cause a woman to forfeit anything, because there's a solution. She could inspect herself before intimacy, and then that's fine. Then they could be together. If she inspected herself and found that she was clear, and then after relations, she found that she entered into the state of a niddah, and this happened 3 times in a row, So such a couple, unfortunately, is not allowed to remain married. Obviously, unless they could know what the cause is and they could cure it. Modern medicine, probably doctors can figure out what the issue is. But at least back in the day, if there is no way to, there is no cure, and it seems that intimacy actually causes her to have an onset, not just of any external bleeding, but of a period, then they would never be allowed to be together, because the Torah prohibits intimacy at a time of when a woman is in the state of niddah. So that would obviously be a tragic situation. And in such a scenario, he needs to divorce her. He doesn't need to give the ksuba. Why not? She didn't know about this in advance, right? This is something that came as a result of intimacy. So I see in the footnote that some authorities have maintained that she is entitled to ksuba. Now the Rambam says not. Why? Because, interestingly, generally the idea of a ksuba is to prevent divorce. The idea of a ksuba is that a man's not going to just divorce his wife because he'll see that there's a price to pay. He's going to need to pay those $25,000. But in such a scenario, he's actually required to divorce her because unfortunately that marriage won't work because of this medical condition that doesn't allow them to be together. So therefore, since divorce over here is what needs to be done, the ksuba wasn't instituted to prevent divorce. When he divorces her, he may never remarry her, because if she heals and in the meantime, and then they decide to remarry, then it would reveal that when he divorced her, it was only conditional. And when a divorce is made, it needs to be made absolutely, completely. In Judaism, divorce is not like a temporary, try it out, let's see. Divorce is divorce. Divorce, unfortunately, is a scenario where the two individuals must each completely separate and move on in their lives. Although she has this medical condition, she would still be allowed to remarry somebody else, as will be explained in another section, because it's possible that specifically when engaging in intimacy with this man, that's what caused this problem, and it wouldn't occur with somebody else. When does the Bav apply? When the woman had this condition from the beginning of her marriage, and from the very first time they were together, again, every time they were together, it caused an onset of a period, which is a problem. If, however, this only occurred later in her marriage, then he has to pay out in full. Therefore, if the couple engages in relations even once, and this did not cause her to enter into a period, and afterwards, at a later point, this did happen, then although they'd have to get divorced because they can't be together because of this medical condition, he would have to pay out her ksuba in full. And he wouldn't be allowed to remarry her, as we explained above. Okay, other types of blemishes. If she becomes a leper, if he desires to remain married to her, he can. If he wants to divorce her, he also can, but he has to pay the ksuba. He says leper, he doesn't describe what a leper is over here. I think a leper, mukas shchid, is where it would be like or some kind of ailment. Okay, I think I know what it is, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to leave it because I don't want to give the wrong information. Halacha number 11. The following rules apply when a husband suffers blemishes after he marries, even if his hand or foot is cut off, or he becomes blinded in one eye, and his wife no longer desires to live with him, he is not forced to divorce her and pay her the money due to her by ksuba. Instead, if she wants to stay married, she can. If she doesn't want to, then since she is the one that's terminating the marriage, and he's not at fault, he was happy to stay married, so he is not required to give her a ksuba. So this obviously is relevant in the case of divorce. It often has to do with who's calling the divorce. If the husband is calling the divorce, he has to pay her out. If the wife is calling the divorce, then he doesn't, because he'll say, why should I pay you? I'm happy to stay married. Okay, the same would be with any woman who rebels against her husband or asks for divorce when he wants to stay married, he wouldn't have to pay out the ksuba. If, however, he becomes afflicted by constant bad breath or a smell from his nose, or becomes a collector of dog feces, that he makes that into his job. A miner of copper or a tanner, all people that are very stinky and smelly, then he has to divorce her and give her her ksuva, because unless she wants to stay married, because for most women they can't live like that. Again, I think in the 21st century there are solutions for all of these things. I would hope, at least. If a man becomes a leper, mukas shchid again. Yeah, okay, it is what I thought. This mukas shchid is where a person's limbs would start depreciating and falling off. And the more the person exerted efforts, the more sick they became. So if a man gets this ailment, then he has to divorce her, because the very act of intimacy is going to make his health deteriorate. And so that we don't want, basically he wouldn't be allowed to stay married and continue to be intimate, because he'd be killing himself. If she says that I want to stay married to him, and so we won't have intimacy at all, we could even have other people in our home present to ensure, leave the door open, and they'll see that's and that way there'll be no see, even if he says that he won't engage in intimacy, we don't trust him. But if there are other people around and she's okay with that, then they could stay married. If she says, there's more to marriage than that, and I'll manage without it. Following rules apply when a woman's husband had constant bad breath or a smell from his nose, or he was a collector of dog feces or the like, and he died, but she was happy to stay married to him. Now, when he died, her brother, she now has this mitzvah to marry her late husband's brother, because they didn't have any children. You'll learn more about that in one of the other sections. It's called Yibum. So the woman can say to the brother of her deceased husband, who has that same medical condition, that just because I tolerated it in my husband, that's because it was him. But with you, I wouldn't be able to tolerate it. And based on that premise, she has the right not to do Yibum and still receive her ksuva in full. Okay, and he ends on a positive note. May you see your children, father children, may you see your children have children, and may their peace be over Israel. So let's end on a positive note. We always end on the positive note. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through all the laws of marriage, some which are of greater relevance to us and some which are of not as much relevance to us. But the common denominator of them all is that it is the wisdom of Hashem. And really, all of these concepts exist on a level of wisdom that's totally beyond our comprehension. But it's only out of Hashem's tremendous kindness that he takes his infinite wisdom and lowers it down to a level where we can also study these very laws, thereby being connected with him. And so certainly there's a connection of Torah study with Purim. Make sure to hear the Megillah tonight and tomorrow, and to do the other 3 mitzvahs, to have a meal, to give gifts to a friend, to give gifts to the poor. Wishing you all a joyful Purim.